Today I'm going to show you just how quickly you can set up a decent tarp shelter, and also a few flourishes and strengthening features that show just how solid they can be. But this isn't a tutorial like my other tarp videos, this is also hopefully going to illustrate why I think tarps are great. This is horrible. I'm cold, I'm wet, but at the very least we've got a quick break in the rain. Let's get a shelter up as quickly as we possibly can. Starting now. Secret backpack emerges. The footage you're now seeing is twice the speed of real life, and even at that pace you can see it's hardly like I'm rushing. I'm being methodical, taking the tarp out and taking the peg bags out and so on, and that's because I didn't want to try and rush this to prove a point of how quickly you can set up a tarp. I wanted to do it slowly, calmly and in an orderly manner, and then be able to illustrate to you just how quick the tarp shelter is. And the actual real life build time, even with all this time it's taken to get that first peg into the ground, the entire process was 2.5 minutes. We are building the Holden tent tarp shelter here, and this epitomises the second thing that I want to point out, which is why I love tarps, the sheer simplicity. Although, as I say, this isn't meant to be one of my tutorial videos, I can summarise the guides to building this shelter in a couple of sentences. I went to the rear edge of the tarp from the camera's perspective and I pegged down those two corners. Then I've come to the front of the tarp, I've put a trekking pole in the central loop, and now I'm just pegging down those remaining corners with the pole upright in the centre. And that's why it took 2.5 minutes to build. Okay, that was pretty quick. I'm impressed with that. Don't worry, we are going to go around and add some strengthening flourishes to this in just a moment, but I wanted to start by focusing on it here in its rawest, purest form. Just 4 pegs, a tarp and a trekking pole, not even a single guy line involved in this setup. So this is what I'd consider to be almost the emergency rapid shelter setup, where you might be caught in the rapid downpour coming in, or there might be any number of reasons why you suddenly want to get in a shelter, and you can see you can build a very basic rudimentary one, but a shelter nevertheless, within 3 minutes of all of your kit still being in your rucksack. I just want to replay this moment again, where I removed the poncho tarp hybrids that I was wearing as I built the shelter, and as I enter the shelter, it immediately swaps from keeping me dry and safe from the elements outside to becoming a waterproof ground sheet. Now that is efficiency. So you can see what we've basically built so far is a really rough and ready quick shelter, as I say, for emergency use really. However, if you wanted to spend the night in something like this, I mean, there's a couple of options. First of all, if you were staying here for a while, you could build a far more enclosed tarp, but I'll leave you to look at my other tutorial videos for the ridiculous amount of options and versatility tarps can offer. But more importantly, if we pretend that I have decided inexplicably that this is the specific tarp setup that I want to sleep in, I can just do what you're seeing now. Go around, start pegging down extra loops to the ground, which is of course going to help to stop the flapping of the material, but more significantly help to stop the wind and elements driving up and under from the ground beneath the tarp. If we zoom in, you can see that as we add guy lines to some of the extra loops that cross over the back of the actual shelter area itself, not only are we strengthening the structure, but we're also pulling out and opening up just a little more internal space as well. So it took us roughly 2.5 minutes to build what I call that basic emergency version of the shelter, where we just add the basic 4 pegs, a pole and the tarp itself. And then we've spent maybe 2.5 minutes, maybe even less time, adding these extra strengthening flourishes, extra pegs and a few extra guy lines. So in absolutely no more than 5 minutes building time, we've created a significantly more wind resistant shelter. We've created a little more internal space and certainly a more solid roof and wall structure by adding those guy lines. And We've done it all with a bit of kit that ultimately will fold down into a small bag that can go in our rucksack. I'll be completely honest here, my friends, there's one thing that's really annoyed me about this footage, and it is that I forgot to peg down my poncho tarp ground sheet. It just completely slipped my mind, so as far as I'm concerned, it looks scruffy inside the shelter there. You can see from the rear, though, that if I really wanted to prove a point, I could add even more pegs to the available loops and pull out just another couple of inches of interior headspace if I really wanted to. But by this point, I was confident the shelter was already stable enough to prove, at least for purposes of this video, just how nice and solidly they can be built. And if I really wanted to go overboard, I could even add an extra guy line to each of these front edges of the entrance to the shelter, and then we'd really be able to start pulling this tarp tight. And to be honest, I feel that it would almost seem like overkill, that it would seem ridiculous, it would seem too solid in some respects. But what I wanted to do here with this internal chatter was talk about building it and say a lot of the things that I've said simply as a commentary over the actual building footage, because hopefully this is far more interesting. And we're going to now see me rapidly disassemble all this and get the shelter down and run away back under the cover of the poncho tarp. And again, this is what I say, I do love this poncho tarp hybrid, but watch this, get ready, watch my feet. Oh, I nearly fell over the front guy line while covering my head with the poncho, well, trying to get it to go over my cap peak as well. So just a warning on safety there. And this is partly why some people use their trekking poles with the spikes pointed down towards the ground. Let's get out of here! Because if you trip over, in my case, with the spike of my trekking pole pointing upwards, if I fall onto that in the darkness, that is probably not going to do me much good, we'll say that much. We're going to watch the breaking down process in twice real life speed once again, and typically you can see it really started to hammer down as soon as I wanted to end this filming session and get back to the relative comfort of civilization, although these days I'm not so sure, perhaps you're better off staying in a field in the tarp. However, you'll notice that even in these conditions, I wanted to prove the point about how quick and easy this process is and do it all in an orderly fashion, rather than just shoving everything straight into me rucksack as quick as possible, which is tempting in these weather conditions. And even the tarp I actually roll up and shake off and put back into its small carry pouch. A final thought on tarps here from me. At the start of the year, I was exclusively a tent camper. I didn't even own a tarp like this, and I didn't even want to buy one because I was so skeptical about them. And I managed to get this particular tarp for free off DD Hammocks. And you know what? Straight away, I realised what I'd been missing. And since then, I actually have bought a tarp from DD Hammocks as well. So their marketing idea worked on me. My own videos and experience made me buy more from them. But as I always say, they didn't ask me to do any videos or anything. I just genuinely started this year exclusively as a tent camper, and I'm ending this year almost exclusively as a tarp and bivvy camper. I'll leave some Amazon associate links to some of my kit in the description below so you can see it on Amazon. If you buy through those links, I will get a commission, so it's an excellent way to support these videos if you are looking to buy something like this anyway. Speaking of support, I'd like to say a huge thank you to anybody who's spent their time watching my videos, and a huge thank you to any of my recent PayPal supporters, channel members, Facebook subscribers, super thankers and so on. It really means a lot to me and it is a huge help, believe me. I'd also like to say I've just set up one of those coffee pages or whatever they're called, because I've been led to believe that PayPal isn't as popular as it once was. So thank you all for any support ever, and until the next time, keep it tarp worthy, have a fantastic day, and of course my friends, farewell.